Okay. Hey guys, come on in, come on in. Hey Shawn, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And so I just want to tell the audience, yes, you were supposed to be here yesterday, but you canceled on me. You
I
had
did.
something better. You had something better to do. And here's
So,
where you were. But I canceled on you first for Steve
yeah,
Bannon.
equal cancellations. I think they cancel each other out. But basically, very short notice yesterday, I had a chance to go to a Governor LePage. We're trying to get Governor LePage elected here in Maine. We've, for the last 4 years, had the worst governor in Maine's history, in Janet Mills, who is part of the whole cabal of the MEA, Maine Teachers Union, and the Department of Education. But Governor Youngkin came up from Virginia, and really educational freedom is what he really campaigned on that last month of the year and flipped that entire state from blue to red. So Governor Youngkin came up to stump for Governor LePage, and I had a couple notes here. LePage, kind of for the first time, he's talked a little bit about education, but I really think educational freedom is what will win anybody an election. And regardless if you're a school board member, legislator, senator, or governor. But Governor LePage last night said, really need to let the money follow the student. And you've seen some really good efforts there in Arizona here recently. He talked about increasing trade schools, which is a big piece up here, getting back to the basics, empowering parents with a Bill of Rights. Right now, the last Bill of Rights, I think, for parents in Maine was 2010. It's woefully out of date. He talked about louder voices for parents and that they need a choice and they need to learn how to think, not what to think. So he did a good job. I think the GOP in Maine, unfortunately, has not really leaned into this educational freedom aspect because they're afraid of getting called out in the local newspaper. But yeah, no, I appreciate being able to bump this to today because I wanted to shake his hand and get a picture, and he's somebody that I certainly have followed. Now I'm partial to America's governor, Ron DeSantis, down in Florida, but I would say Youngkin for me is a good second guy on that list.
Excellent. And it was a very, very big win. It was a very big night for parental rights. I remember we had like an all-star lineup of Tiffany Justice with Moms for Liberty, Alana Fishbein with No Left Turn that night,
Yeah.
and several other Dead Philman and several other luminaries just doing an election watch party. It was something to behold, particularly being in that neighboring state of North Carolina that we are. So Shawn, let's back up for a second.
Sure.
You are you're kind of a badass in the movement. I mean, you're a pioneer in the movement. And we always say, right, we want more dads, more dads. You are like almost the founding father of this movement. You've been on Tucker. I mean, you're the guy. You're the go-to guy for everyone to talk about parental rights and education. Give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, well, honestly, he probably doesn't show up, but you just gave me goosebumps. So thank you. That was amazing. I'm definitely going to show my wife this video. But really, what happened was in 2020, we received a white supremacist letter on the heels of George Floyd's death from my daughter's school. I have twin daughters at the time, were juniors in high school, and that was at the end. That was in June, so the end of their junior year. And I started to pursue investigating or trying to understand the concepts that they were pushing on my kids, something I didn't know about. I thought we lived in the best little town in America, in Cumberland, Maine, the alleged best school in Maine, in Mammoth City 51 Greeley, and very quickly found that that wasn't the case, and they didn't want me to get in their shorts and find out what was going on. And so it was an adversarial relationship almost from the beginning. They banned me from my kids' graduation, and ultimately that's what landed me on Tucker and Harris Faulkner and Sky News Australia. So this thing went global, right? So I proved, and so did many other reporters, that really was pushing critical race theory, and there was no doubt about it. So my girls graduated. I got to see graduation, and I moved back to my hometown in Hamden. And when I moved back here, my friends said, "Hey, Shawn, you spoke for students and parents and taxpayers and teachers down there who have not yet found their voice because of cancel culture. Do you know how bad the school system is here in your hometown where you graduated from?" And honestly, I wasn't sure what to do because I just wanted to decompress. And I also quit my job a year ago, June. So I ended up starting to dive into finding out about the hypersexualization of minors occurring in Reedsbrook Middle School, predominantly from the Maine Teacher of the Year, Kelsey Stoyanova. And I basically did some homework on her book list. She created this book list, which was part of the Department of Education's press release on her, winning this award. and very quickly found books from Ibram X. Kendi, aka Henry Rogers. It's Perfectly Normal, All Boys Aren't Blue. Middle School's a Drag, which we ended up doing on Laura Ingraham's show on Fox. We talked about that. And so, she's trying to normalize, drag queens, which I call trans strippers. That's really the right way to call them, in middle school. And these kids, I've got testimony from an 11-year-old girl in middle school who basically says her anxiety and depression is off the charts as soon as she gets off the bus to get to school, because the constant push of LGBTQ. So I've been involved in a nonprofit called Maine First Project with Larry Lockman. I'm the director of special projects, essentially volunteering. I host a podcast called Maine Source of Truth, like the state, spelled like the state, and you were on back in May, and I appreciate that. And I'm really trying to advocate and expose what's going on, not only in Maine, because these examples in Maine are happening everywhere across the country. And, we just recently won a very big decision on a First Amendment case. And we can talk about that a little more if you wish.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was a great decision. And luckily that you won it before shots were officially fired in the courtroom, which is great. And I think it's actually a landmark settlement. And we'll talk about that in a second. And so,
okay.
Nancy, Nancy Anderson with No Left Turn, her and I were really among the first to roll out the dangers of social emotional learning back in February 2021. We saw that and we're like, wait a minute, move over critical race theory. This is the real deal, because it's sort of a black box, social emotional learning, that teachers with ill will can just pack anything that they want to in it. And they do. As a matter of fact, yesterday we heard from a parent who, an 8-year-old in 3rd grade, the teacher was like, okay, choose your pronoun, and then actually recommended a gender affirming clinic to the parent when the child, who really didn't know the difference, circled the they. So these are problems. Now we have it's going on everywhere. As you know, our job here at Education First Alliance is to get America First candidates elected all over the state, up and down the ballot. The reason why is because, look, they're not a perfect party, right, Republicans? But right now, they're our best hope to at least halting the woke agenda. Now, we've noticed that the left likes to take the talking points, and they're trying to do a rope-a-dope on us and say, hey, we're not going to talk about all this woke crap going on. We're going to talk about the purported lack of budget or teacher shortages. I'm telling you, if you're running for school board, if you're a volunteer, if you're a campaign surrogate, do not take the bait. You need to set the agenda, and here's why. You need to, as Shawn is doing, highlight the insane cultural policies that the left has in store for us: showing porn to kids, sexualization of the children, gender bending politics in the classroom, as well as this insane Maoist 4-olds program of social deconstruction. In other words, critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching, which we have in here. So I'm telling you guys, we have to push the pedal down on that, right, Shawn? I mean, we saw this in New York where, the left baited the right into these discussions on finances. The problem with that is that you can't bank on that staying. In other words, the closer we get to the election, the more that the folks in control will manipulate things and make people feel better financially. And then you're left with an argument that won't work. It happens every time. It's like Lucy with a football. What we have to do, what we must do, is push the pedal down in exposing this stuff. And Shawn, I mean, as well as I do, the minority communities are most receptive to this messaging, and that's who the left preys on.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things you mentioned. So you mentioned pronouns, for example. I talked to the Epic Times yesterday. I think they're going to be doing a story shortly, hopefully the end of this week or beginning of next week. But I have them talking to a family here in Hamden, RSU 22, whose, I think, 8-year-old daughter, basically the situation was the teacher put out their homework, and on it is name, age, and pronouns. Now, she didn't fill it out because she has a conservative Christian background. She doesn't believe in it. So she left it blank. The teacher sent it back to the kid, wrote her or something, right? Like wrote her pronouns in for her on this piece of paper, handed it back, and then dinged her a couple points on the homework assignment. And so those are the things, like what I say is the books are getting all of the pomp and circumstance, right? The sort of alleged trying to ban books. Now, nobody I know is trying to ban books. They're trying to remove inappropriate content or provide parental consent and age appropriateness in the school. But the situation, like you say, I mean, it's like drinking from a fire hose from the leftists. They're trying to inundate and overwhelm the parents. And so I kind of say, listen, don't lose the forest through the trees scenario, because it's all part of critical pedagogy. And you know how it kind of worked out was critical race theory. Then we went into masking. Then we went into hypersexualization of minors, and now we're into social emotional learning, the whole child. I hit the target the other day with a teacher in Ellsworth who I don't think knew what she was doing, but in her classroom, a concerned parent sent me a picture and it said, classroom is family, right? So that's the next level. They're trying to separate kids from their parents, or they're trying to put teachers on the same level as parents and then inundate them with this nonsense of leftist pedagogy, which basically says everything is a political connotation to their teaching. I've talked to a number of minority parents who are fed up with this. So I think in some cases, the minority might not know exactly what they're getting into, just like it doesn't matter, white, black, or whatever color your skin. Until we expose this, parents don't think it's going on. But I've talked to a number of Black fathers in the Portland, Maine area, and they don't want their kid to have this crutch. They didn't like critical race theory because they didn't want their kid to be, labeled an oppressed kid. They're just a kid, regardless of skin color.
Right, exactly. But when you look at the value system, the strong value system of family that we see in the Hispanic community, unfortunately, much more than the American family right now, when we see the strong connection of the African American community to the church, those sort of things, it's in direct contrast to the vision that the left has for America. And I say this politically, and the reason I say that is because guess who started it? The left did. They've politicized everything. And unfortunately, when in Rome, right, we have to do this. And so, yes, as you mentioned, the forest for the trees, as you have that as your background, what you just spoke about is an issue, legally speaking, called compelled speech, you guys. Compelled speech means this, and it's a great grounds for a lawsuit here, is if I'm made to say I am a they instead of a she, and I'm being forced to do it, that is compelled speech. I believe that's a Title VII violation, something like that. And so compelled speech means this. It's not suggested, it's not recommended, it's not optional. It's you must do that or we are going to ding you points. That is on its face a violation of compelled speech. If you see that, parents, you need, if you see that and you want to do something about it, right? First, look, report it to the principal. I wouldn't even deal with a teacher. I'd go right there, right at the district, take your steps, because if you do sue, you want to show that you've taken the appropriate steps and gone up the chain and tried everything. But Shawn, as you know, this system of complaining and making your voice heard, it's set up and run by the people who are actually offending the parents and the students.
Yeah, no doubt. And most of these policies, at least in Maine, and I'm assuming in school boards across the country, they can limit your time. So they can say, hey, look, you only have 3 minutes. But based on this recent lawsuit that we pushed on RSU 22, my hometown here in Hamden, Maine, they cannot control the content. The only two things the First Amendment does not do for you is essentially you can't use obscenities, which are somewhat difficult to define, but I would say the 7 things that George Carlin said you couldn't say on television. And then you can't incite violence. But these school boards, again, run by the MEA Maine Teachers Union and the Department of Education's and a bunch of woke leftist lobbying companies, they've put in these policies to say you can't talk about Kelsey Stoyanova, the Maine Teacher of the Year, who's really grooming children with a book list on hypersexualization. They won't let you say that in a meeting. Now, this lawsuit, I believe, is setting precedent that you can say that in the meeting. They can ask you not to do it, but you can continue to say it. And if they decide to withhold your First Amendment rights, and if they decide to hold my First Amendment rights here, we're going to sue them again. And we'll just keep doing it. So the $40,000 that we got from Hamden was a settlement. Originally, they wanted me to sign an NDA so I couldn't talk about it. And I said, well, that'll cost you another $40,000. And they decided against it. I wasn't going to sign it anyway. Because again, the exposure of what's happening in these woke school boards, and what I feel like our school board chair, Heath Miller, he's a 3rd-generation cow farmer. He's allegedly a good father. But these are just kind of weak beta males, unfortunately, that are in these positions, or they're just afraid to get called names by the left because the left is so vicious and it's a small minority. And so nobody wants to be called a racist, misogynist, homophobe. But I can tell you, Sloan, that's the big three for me, right? That's what they call me all the time. None of them are true. But, we have another lawsuit the next town over in Herman, Maine. Herman, Maine is suing me with taxpayer funds for calling out another teacher, Mallory Cook. And we can talk about that a little bit too, if you wish.
Yeah, I mean, you're willing to say her name and talk. I love it. I mean, because you can't.
All right, cool.
So, right. Yeah, you can go ahead. Take the gloves off, man. I'm
so good. Well, and it's funny. You probably can't see it. This T-shirt I'm wearing today basically says, "My job is not to wake up the sheep; it's to wake up the lions." And that's what I really feel my role is. What people see on TV or their perception of me is not the real me, right? We're kind of playing a character to some degree. I'm a deep introvert. I would much rather be in my side by side with my dog who's sitting right next to me than speaking to you today, not because I don't enjoy the conversation, and it's not that I haven't enjoyed our relationship, but it's just not natural for me. So I can play this role. But anyway, long story short, I had a parent come to me in Herman and say, "Hey, there's a 40-book transgender library display in the library in the high school, and I don't feel comfortable exposing this. Will you do that for me?" And I said, "Absolutely," right? And so I put it up on Facebook. You can look for the Maine Source of Truth Facebook page. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Shawn McBreairty or at ME Source of Truth. I'm both in Facebook jail right now and in Twitter jail, which I think is a badge of honor. But so I put this up here, and once I started finding out more, and just like in every school district, I politely said to them, "Hey, look, you might want to think about the ramifications of this." They also displayed a placard with 63 genders, right? So the more I found out about this, I found out about a life-size, non-binary Kathy doll that these students had put into the classroom to extort money from the teachers. And then I found out about this woman, Mallory Cook, who was the 9th grade English teacher, a equity expert for the Maine Teachers Association. She actually, I think, was either on their board or had applied for their board. And the situation really is, yeah, great, thank you. And then we ended up doing some homework and found out very quickly that she did in the fall of 2020, from the taxpayer funded classroom that we allow her to operate in, she did a anti-Trump Bernie Sanders video with the Maine People's Alliance, the most leftist group here in the state, from the classroom with taxpayer funded internet and taxpayer funded computers. So I brought that to light. And then I also found out that they had a GSA. So I think Chris Rufo just exposed this about 3 weeks ago. GSA is a gay sexuality alliance. It's in 4,000 schools in 40 states in America. And their basically Marxist ideology is the same thing. They want to separate the kid from the family. They want to eliminate capitalism. They love anarchy and socialism. And so I started to expose that Mallory Cook was the paid faculty advisor. It only said GSA on the extracurricular. Nobody knew what it was. And so you've got the choice as a parent in Herman to send your kid to soccer, band, chorus, or talk sexuality after school with a 40-year-old teacher. Nobody knew about it, Sloan, right? So long story short, the more I expose this and the more of my opinion I use based on 2 years of doing this. And you mentioned kind of being, I sometimes say I'm like an OG guy in this space, but it's only been 2 years, right? It's like dog years. So they basically sued me, and they're trying to muzzle me from speaking about their school. Now, fast forward a little bit further, I spoke at the school board meeting there in Herman probably 3 weeks ago. And I said, look, at this point, it might just be easier to find another English teacher than to continue to fight this in the court of law, which they're going to lose. And the next day, Mallory Cook resigned. And so she no longer even works for the school. They're still trying to sue me to muzzle my First Amendment rights because Drummond Woodson, the legal arm of all of the schools here in Maine, I've been a thorn in their side. And so they're trying to make an example out of me, Sloan, and they're trying to paint me as the typical domestic terrorist, which, you and I have been called many things like that. But they're going to lose, and they're going to lose big. And I think that settlement might be $250,000. And then we might countersue them. We're still talking about that. So these folks just don't understand that using taxpayer money to sue a taxpayer who's telling other taxpayers of the poor use of taxpayer funds in the school is just like this revolving circle of idiocy. It doesn't make any sense. So the reason I've spoken at other towns' school board meetings is because, again, in Maine, the cancel culture is so venomous that these people don't feel comfortable to stand up and do 3 minutes. And, I've never raised my voice. I talk at a school board meeting just like you and I are talking. I don't pound the podium. I don't scream and shout. I don't use swear words. but I do get the point across. And when I walk into a school board meeting, those school board members know they're going to have a rough night, and I'm going to continue to expose it. And more parents and taxpayers are going to come the next meeting. And that's what happened in Herman. I had a woman whose sole objective was to prove me wrong. And very quickly, she found that I was right. And now she's one of the biggest advocates in that town, fighting for her children and her taxpayers. So it can happen if just one person stands up. And listen, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, right? Like, I'm not a rocket surgeon, but the gist of it is I can stand up. And I guess my feeling is, at this point, God has given me these skills to take heat and to stand and lean into discomfort. And, we're just in this situation where if you're not going to play confrontational politics, you are going to get stuffed in the corner. And I just decided I'm not going to let them do that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the left is absolutely wretched. And as far as, silencing your speech, yeah, I mean, we're seeing it here where, someone says something that the other one doesn't like. And unbelievably, in the state of North Carolina, you can go down to a police station and swear out a warrant on somebody for something called cyber stalking or something, and we see it all the time where, we're critical of something and bam, they throw these charges on you, and then they go run their mouth about, oh my gosh, they've got criminal charges.
What I would say to any parent that's standing up at the microphone, if any part of their speech that is not inciting violence and not obscenities is being constricted, they need to say, I'm sorry, Mr. or Mrs. Chairperson, are you restricting my First Amendment rights? And that really ultimately, because the First Amendment trumps all policy, right? Policies are repugnant to the Constitution. And these things I'm learning a lot from my lawyer, Mark Randazza, who is just a badass lawyer. He's represented everybody from Satanists to Christians, and I fall somewhere in between. But he doesn't care what you're into. He just wants to know that the First Amendment can speak for you. And it speaks for everybody, including the left, by the way, who, when they attack you or I, it's not really defamation, it's an opinion. And the situation is that, if you wanted to file a defamation lawsuit, you certainly could. But anyway, the point of the story is, anybody that stands up to that microphone, when that chairperson interrupts you because you're saying, teacher Mrs. or Mrs. Smith is hypersexualizing my kids and I don't like it, when they tap out and say, you can't say that, just say, are you trying to stifle my First Amendment rights? And when they can't answer that question, then you find a lawyer. Or in my case, Mark found me through a friend. He saw the issue in Herman, called me for 45 minutes. We talked. And he's not a typical lawyer. He's kind of funny. And very quickly, we made this relationship to start taking on these school boards. And again, like you say, if you're not going to do it, who's going to do it? Right. And so, I just figured, all right, I'm going to stand up for, again, students, parents, taxpayers, and teachers who have not found their voice yet. And I hope that if folks can't stand beside me, that they'll stand behind me. And one of these things with this lawsuit is, it is a crowd-funded lawsuit. So we hope we win all of our legal bills. But so far, I think in Herman, I just received another $18,000 bill the other day from my lawyer. I have a Give, Send, Go account. And
I'm going to look it up right now.
Okay. www.givesendgo.com/Shawn McBreairty. And there's a lot of vowels in McBreairty, but it's E-air in the middle. And what I'm asking folks to do is just, if they could chip in $5 or $10 or $20, I mean, some people have been super generous, but I think I've only raised maybe $1,800, and I'm trying to raise 50 grand. And so every little bit counts. And I know we are all stretched very thin, but what I say to folks is, again, if you are doing like in-kind donations, if you're doing full requests or you're doing stepping up to the microphone, hey, listen, I don't need a nickel because you're doing it. But if you're scared still because of cancel culture, or you're a teacher, or you work for the school district, or your husband works for the school district, I just ask, give $5 or $10. And what I'm going to do is, when we win in Herman, I will take all of the money that I've received and I will put it back into another parent's legal situation, because there are not enough lawyers out there for these parents. And these are fairly winnable cases, easily winnable cases. But what I'm finding is most of the legal community is like 75% swings left,
Yeah.
So if you can find a conservative lawyer, God bless you, because that's the first start. But I appreciate you putting that up on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, any silencing of First Amendment, of speech is absolutely horrific. Like I said, The left is absolutely brutal, and they will do these things, where they don't have the balls to sue you. What they'll do is they'll misuse the criminal justice system to try to silence opinions that they don't like. Of course, that doesn't stop them from running their mouth. So again, this kind of stuff, this sexualization, this, Marxist cultural shift, it is a combination of weak Republicans on our side, right? And I think a lot of them, maybe they're well-meaning, they don't know the nature of the threat. They don't know, they don't understand, and they are afraid of people like you and me because, we'll call you out, but they'll learn from us, right?
Well, I've got a good story. I got a good story about that as well. Is that so Jeff Timberlake? I call this guy Jeff. It's a local issue, Timberlake. He is the Senate Minority Leader here in Augusta, and he unfortunately doesn't know yet how important educational freedom is to Maine's next election. He's told all of his senators. He told me this to his face. So if he's sitting here in the room, I'd say the same thing: to not go to a school board meeting unless they're invited. Now, I would say, I'm making a number up here, the majority of school boards in Maine are run by Democrats. Do you think they will ever invite their local senator into a school board meeting? Absolutely not. The other thing is Stacey No-Show Guerin, who is my local senator here in Hamden. Dozens of parents reached out to her via email because I forward requested them from her, and I have them here. Dozens of parents asked her for help in RSU 22, including myself. She wouldn't even meet with me. Now, I've been told by multiple sources that there are people in the GOP here in Maine who say, do not speak to Shawn McBreairty. And I'm like, is it the truth that you're worried about? Is it that I'm a 6 foot tall, 225, fairly handsome 51-year-old? Or is it because you are afraid that if you don't do it, I will call your ass out? And that's probably it, right? Until these rhinos get out of the way or get on the boat or get on the train that's leaving the station, we're going to have another 4 years of this nonsense. And, we hope we'd have a governor like Governor Youngkin from Virginia and Governor LePage. And I think he's the right guy. But really, it's like it's almost like this minutia of the GOP that they really don't want to get people elected because then they might actually have to work. I mean, they might actually have to get called out in the media, or maybe by leftists, insurrectionists that are standing in front of the Capitol building. They just are weak folks who are afraid and thin-skinned. And honestly, they shouldn't be in the position, because if you can't uphold your oath of office under God to protect the First Amendment and your constituents, you don't belong to be in a position like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a Republican, I guess you could say, superintendent here that feels like we've been criticizing her. No, that is not true. She's over the biggest, most well-funded bureaucracy in the state of North Carolina. That would be the Department of Public Instruction. And yet she supports social emotional learning. She has and openly supports it. And again, look, we're in politics. We get it, right? I mean, this is the demonization of the messenger is what they like to do to discredit you. But again, the truth always wins out. And I'll tell all you guys, the content creators, good content finds people. In other words, do not care. I've been blackballed actually from speaking at GOP meetings, etc. Now, that didn't stop me from, being a keynote speaker in 5 different conventions in 5 different counties, because there's pockets in North Carolina's 100 counties, right, that want to hear the truth. And so what I'm saying is, if this happens to you, if you're speaking out with truth and on point, right, at these meetings, you don't go off on a tangent and make it a big clown show,
right?
And keep doing it, keep speaking, because again, good content finds people, and that's what you need to do. Keep creating that content. Look, that we're going to be a live wire that people don't want to tango with. You have to accept it. If you as an activist want to go along to get along, then you should probably find another job as either a staffer or maybe a politician. I don't know. But I think, yeah, Shawn, I mean, look, the public is sick and tired of this crap on both sides. And they're tired of both sides making it a political issue.
Yeah. To your point, I've been called a lightning rod. I've been called all kinds of things. But listen, I say, first off, again, I mentioned, I'm not the smartest guy around, but I'm very diligent. I'm very detail oriented. I don't think there are many people that can out diligence me when I put my mind to something. And if I'm healthy physically, mentally, I can just rock and roll on most big concept items and dwindle them down to some points. But I say to everybody, yeah, every school board meeting, show up at every policy meeting, show up at every workshop, talk to your town council. Even though your town council might not have direct oversight to your school board, it's another point of sort of interruption. And I say I'm an advocate. I don't necessarily like the word activist, because I think activists are folks that are running around with megahorn, whatever those things are, and microphones and really kind of screeching at somebody on the steps and not letting them pass. But I'm advocating for people who are afraid. And this situation of cancel culture, again, you're seeing it, personally. I've obviously seen it personally. They just hate it when somebody has enough stick-to-itiveness and knows that the truth is right. That's why I named my podcast The Main Source of Truth. I'm not 100% right 100% of the time, but I can tell you, nobody in 2 years, Sloan, has been able to counter anything. And in 2 years, I've not seen one actual description of institutional racism. There is nobody bullying the LGBTQ community. Sloan, if you said you wanted to identify as a giraffe, I would say, I don't care. That's great. But the moment that you want to help, push that identification on me, I'm like, I'll tolerate it, Sloan. Like, if you want to call yourself a giraffe, that's cool. But then can we talk about, I don't know, football or NASCAR or politics or something that doesn't have anything to do with your skin color or your orientation or your sexuality or where you came from? It's like, this isn't really the greatest way to say it. If you're an asshole, you're an asshole. It doesn't really matter what your package is. And we're seeing a lot. I've been lib bombed this week like you have no idea. Well, you do have an idea. People from across the country. These are very well organized people who saw my post in Ellsworth and came into the Facebook page and started bombing me with comments. And I was reading some of them to my wife on the deck the other night and just laughing. But yeah, these people who want equity and inclusion and all of these nice terms, they don't want equity they want equity of thought. They do not want dissenting opinion. And I just happen to think I'm right because I've been doing this for 2 years. Right.
We'll have to step in here. What we're seeing, we started in January of 2021. So we started pretty early on this. What we're seeing now is we do have elements, get this now, guys, of the far right. And we're understanding now that the far right and the far left are exactly alike. It's a totalitarian mindset. Right. We will attack you. And if you come back with it, then how dare you, et cetera. That's how the left and the far right operate. So maybe this is good. I've talked to a couple of political science professors yesterday, and they're like, look, that's a good thing. When the far left and the far right meet, and we actually see them sharing content now back and forth. And I say that because in mature movements, like in North Carolina, this is kind of eventually what happens. So they're sharing things. Once the far left and the far right have met, it allows more space for people who are everyday common sense people to actually come together as one and say, hey, we're not going to tolerate this. Here's the key though, guys. If you're in a parental rights movement, you've got to hold both sides accountable, right? You cannot say, hey, they're totalitarian, they're saying things are just nuts, etc., and then ignore what's going on your own side. And I think that's the ticket to winning, and that's key. By no means am I saying, hey, can't we just all get along? Or, hey, great, we're all can agree to disagree. Hell no.
Right.
Now that we're getting rid of the performative nonsense of the Antifa, Black Lives Matter protesters, and then these nut jobs on the right, we can actually have strong conversations and advocate for things, because guess what? Now these school board members, now these state reps do not have these extremists to point to and say, hey, you're one of them. No, we're not. We've called them out. We've called them out on our side and their side. That has gotten us so much credibility. I can't even tell you. We're able to now talk to a lot of people because they're like, hey, you guys just don't want extremism at all. I'm like, exactly. Right. That's why when we teach, right,
Well, it's funny. It is funny. So the Bangor Daily News, which I wouldn't buy to crumple up and set on fire on my wood stove here in Maine, they call me a far right activist all the time. And I said to my wife the other day, I said, I don't even think I know a far right person. I don't even know if I've seen a far right person, but I'm not a far right person. I'm a Christian who loves America, right? Does that make me a Christian nationalist? I don't think so. I mean, these terms that they want to paint on you is all they have, Sloan. And once you can kind of lean into that discomfort and push through that membrane and kind of break through the other side, you can find, I kept a spreadsheet for a while. I've been called 40 different names because I literally have it on paper, right? And I do it to make myself laugh, because if you can't contain, I think for me, like I have a kind of a dry sense of humor. If you can't make fun of some of the things that are going on in the world, and honestly, in some cases, and I usually give them multiple chances, I'll make fun of somebody like a Jeff Timberlake by calling him, Jeff No Show Timberlake, or local issue Timberlake, because at the end of the day, I've tried a dozen times to pull them into the fight and they've chosen not to. So I'm like, all right, I'll use some of the tactics. Like,
Trump did it. It was so great. Lion Ted, Crooked Hillary. I mean, it works. The labeling and the mockery works. It works because it brands people. And so people have in their mind, right? And hopefully some of these politicians who don't like the branding, of course, polite branding of elected officials and stuff, but if they don't like the branding, hopefully the thought is, right, they'll work against it and actually do
one way or another, like pick a side, right? If you're stuck in that neutral position trying to think that you're going to move moderates one way or another, it's not going to happen. To some degree, you need this Overton window where you're screaming from the rooftops. And again, I don't scream, it's just a sort of figurative term. You're providing so much content and insight, like I have on my YouTube channel. If people just search Shawn McBreairty, there are dozens and dozens of examples on there, including a young girl, sophomore from York, down in southern Maine, who went to the microphone. She's a hero of mine, and said, I can't even find an American flag in this school, right? And she's on the verge of tears because she's so stressed out about school. And that superintendent, not once did he look up at her. It's actually under Craven Fan under YouTube, because I'm a big NASCAR fan. But there are just dozens and dozens of examples. And the video that I just put out the other day basically is the headline: RSU 22 in Hamden, Maine chooses porn over free speech. And you can go back and listen to a lot of this content and conversations that I've had with school board members. And this is another thing that I would advocate. It's a little bit shady, but in Maine, we're a one-party state. So you can record any conversation with anybody that you want, as long as you are the one party who knows it's being recorded. And so I've used that to my advantage, knowing that these leftist, progressive, or these just weak beta males, or these people in the school board, are going to basically fight for this LGBTQ cult that, the majority of parents don't agree with. So I use their words against them very often, and that drives them even more crazy. But the other thing is, you mentioned, even with the lib bombing that's happened this week, I've had a number of people like and subscribe and those kind of things. So even with this leftist bashing that's happening with me, hey, more people are coming into the fight. Yeah, it's like good bad news is good news, or whatever. However you say, bad press is good press.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, we've had like a couple of days ago, they put up an email that we sent. We got you. We foiled you. Blah blah.
Right.
That's fantastic. Thank you, dude. Thank you. And so you've got to, listen, you got to work with what you've got. I mean, that's just it. One of my favorite interviews that you've done is with my doppelganger.
Yeah. You guys are, well, and I really refer to you guys both as lionesses. I mean, you guys are mama bears. And, when you look at the podcast guests that I've had and the people that I've been able to build and forge relationships with across the country, like yourself, I mean, again, America's Mom, Jeannie Gentles, Tony Kennett, Lori Barrett, Dr. Elena Fishbein and I used to work together, Ramona Bessinger, Billboard Chris, Kevin Jenkins, Marilyn Muller, Alvin Louis from Courage is a Habit, Jennifer McWilliams, Frank McCormick up in Chicago, Ian Pryor in Virginia, Gabrielle Clark in Phoenix, Nicole Solis. I mean, this has been an amazing ride. Now, not, on a good day, maybe a couple hundred people listen to my podcast, but I just kind of think that if there is good content, eventually people will say, look, Shawn is not a radical right-wing activist. He's a concerned father, parent, and taxpayer who loves his town, state, and country. And if people are not going to stand up, then again, just stand behind me and I'll just rock and roll it for you.
Yeah. And nobody's better than you. I mean, again, you're like the OG. I mean, you are right on dancing on the line of getting thrown in jail and not. And by the way, if you did, it wouldn't be your fault, right? It would be, they wish they could.
I was there a couple summers ago. I was ready to go to jail for the school board meeting. Same thing. My wife at 6 o'clock was crying at the kitchen table saying, "You want to go to jail?" And I said, "No, I don't want to go to jail, but I am willing to go to jail for my First Amendment rights. I don't want to go, believe me. I've done a bunch of ride-alongs with some of my police officer friends, and we've put a lot of people in the county jail, and it's not someplace I want to be. But if
Right.
it comes down to that, then there will be massive, massive retaliation lawsuits. And that's what people have to do. The only thing they're listening to, Sloan, is the lawyers, right? When that legal bill starts jacking up and at $350 to $900 an hour, depending on your lawyer, that's a big financial thing. And again, if you can find a pro bono lawyer who's willing to fight for you, that is how you basically change the system. It shouldn't be that way. It should be very transparent. People should be able to do their own investigation. But at the end of the day, these school boards, they are just beholden to the teachers union, the Department of Education, and their own legal arm. And they're not willing to critically think on things that are very simple, like we probably shouldn't have pornography available to minor children.
Right. Absolutely. And that's why we are here in North Carolina. Not only are we, trying to get America First candidates elected, because America First means school first, right? What's best for this school in this district, not the feds. That's the way we view it. We're working with a couple of lawyers who are very conservative, and they're in the education space, and getting, that's important. So all of the activists, I want to tell you that, look, we've got to unite with conservative lawyers so that they can, there's my dog.
I hear him. That's okay. Mine's sitting here somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on, but we've got to work with
mailman
lawyers. Keep them. Yeah, exactly. We have to get the lawyers with the boards. In other words, if we can get conservative lawyers that have not just one school board, but maybe 5 or 6 in a district, that's when change happens. Here's why. Because if you can get 4 or 5 school boards to sue against, let's just say, the state for forcing social emotional learning with strings attached, and then maybe suing the feds or whatever. Yes, 1 school board, great. 5, completely different. And so you're right. We talk to conservative school board members all the time that, let's say they've got a board of 9 and there are only 2 or 3 on there. And they'll tell us, listen, we don't have a lot of power for the following 2 reasons. Number 1, the state is mandating that we do social emotional learning, or we lose 30% of our funding. Well, the taxpayer base isn't enough to support not doing that. So, okay, they have social emotional learning. And then number 2, their lawyers left wing. And so the lawyer will come down on them and say, nope, you've got to teach about pronouns in kindergarten. You've got to do this. Of course, bullshit, but they'll do it anyway, right? They'll do it anyway. So conservative lawyers, guys, if you're a statewide organization, hook up with a few of them and then socialize getting them hired, right, with other school board members. That's what we're doing here. That's what counts. You got to get the right butts in the right seat on the school board and the right representation.
No doubt. And I have to thank Center for American Liberty and the Randazzo legal group really for helping, really spearhead this work, and Hamden, and also now Herman. We've got some great folks working on that, and they're just, again, their level of professionalism is off the charts. And so you just mentioned one thing, all this money tied to social emotional learning coming from the state. I dare one school board to say, we're not going to do this. We're going to take your money and we're not going to do this. And so see what the state does. Think about the ramifications if a state pulled back 30% of a school budget because they didn't agree with following through with the harmful social emotional learning, the gateway drug to critical race theory and hypersexualization. I would double dare somebody to say, I'm going to take your money, state. I'm not doing this. I'm not signing off on this. And if you wish to pull my money from these kids, that would be the biggest story in America.
Yeah, we just might see that happen. As I said, we're backing candidates all over the state who have that mindset where it's going to be like, look, we're going to be the firewall between what the state is pushing and absolutely what Biden is pushing down in the schools. Look, this Title IX stuff, it is absolutely total insanity. And oh, by the way, guys, if you're running for school board or whatever, and actually, I really don't care what side you're on this one. If you just run on being the firewall between Biden's Title IX policy, which allows boys and girls in the same bathroom, changing rooms, teams, whatever, you'll win. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, you will win and go and canvass in your minority neighborhoods. Why?
Yeah.
Well, because that stuff that is so noxious to the familial bonds and the church bonds. It's sadly, a lot of us, a lot of folks aren't beholden to that, right? Let's talk to the communities that actually are, because guess what? Nobody's knocking on their door to tell them what's going on in their own school.
Yeah, I tell candidates all the time, Sloan, knock on the door with the American flag. That's your easy, that's literally preaching to the choir. And then, you're going to have to hit a few here and there and look for those folks that maybe are not getting representation or don't know. The funny thing that I continue to say, and I said it last night at the LePage Youngkin rally, was, and this is not egotistical, okay, between 10 and 12 million people have seen me on TV across the globe. And believe me, that's not me. But at the same time, 90% of my home state still has no idea what's going on with these kids. Because again, the local media, the national media, beyond, let's say, Fox News and Epic Times, Breitbart, Daily Wire, some of these folks, it's just not getting the exposure. And so, I know many friends who listen to local news all the time, and you're just getting that gaslighting. And then you say, by the way, have you seen the pornography book list that they're pushing on 11-year-old students with prizes and incentives and daily announcements? What did he just say? Yeah, I said pornography in the school.
The pictures, for those of you that are bashful and shy about knocking on someone's doors or maybe talking about this in church, I'm just saying, the pictures. Have you seen the pictures, Shawn? I mean, they do the talking.
No, Genderqueer is the book right now to basically, if you had a clipboard with maybe some signatures or you had some information and behind that, as you start talking, if you find somebody that says, geez, yeah, I am interested. I've got 2 kids here. They're in middle school. What's going on? Well, have you heard this? Have you heard that? No. And then sometimes I'll get the I don't believe you kind of crowd. And then I'll say, well, here's the picture on my phone. Do you believe this? Well, no. Well, here's the picture of the library computer in Hamden, Maine, that says they have this book, All Boys Aren't Blue, which basically it's not like a Harlequin romance, Sloan. This is like hardcore pornography. And the funny thing is, the reason that these guys booted me from RSU 22 is that I played a phone call that I had with the school board chair, Heath Miller, in which I was describing a book in the library. And I said to him something to the effect of, Heath, do you want your daughters reading hardcore anal sex books in middle school and high school? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but this is basically just, pornography is okay as long as it's in the context of a book. And you can hear his words exactly on my YouTube channel. Now, this is the sort of mental gymnastics that these guys are going through to say, well, the book is about love. And so we're going to allow, all of these phrases and words that, again, you wouldn't be able to say if I went to a middle school playground and started reading All Boys Aren't Blue, I would be arrested immediately. But Kelsey Stoyanova, the Maine Teacher of the Year, can push this on 11-year-old minors, and it's perfectly acceptable. It doesn't make any sense. And until we get some district attorneys, with some cojones or ovaries, we're just going to continue to push it and try to get more people into the fight.
Actually, yeah, absolutely. And look, guys, the state attorney general at the state level, very, very critical. So I don't know, a lot of you, are listening and are volunteering for campaigns or whatnot. Again, don't be roped into the strictly the economic issue, right? I mean, we've got a couple things. The literacy crisis, very important. So you need to hammer that. As I said, an all-time high, nobody has a plan unless their plan is more social emotional learning and more critical race theory. That seems to be the plan, Shawn. But the good news is that the illiteracy rate in North Carolina is at an all-time high. So it means that kids can't read this book.
Only 36% of Maine 4th graders read at proficiency. And that number has not changed for the last decade. So basically a little over 1 in 3 kids roaming the hallway can read. And the other 2/3 of the kids that you see can't read. So if you have 2 middle school kids, there's probably a fair chance one of your kids doesn't read at proficiency. And it doesn't get any better. These kids don't catch up when they get into high school. If you can't get them to read at proficiency at 3rd or 4th grade, studies say the chances of them going to prison are astronomically higher because they can't read. And so you're 100% correct. The model is failing, and the definition of insanity is for us to try to continue to do this, the same way we've been doing it time after time. It just doesn't make any sense. In my opinion, figuratively, these Maine Department of Educations, or maybe North Carolina, I can't speak for you, need to figuratively be burned to the ground. And you need to start completely over. Like I would say, if they just said tomorrow, you guys are all fired, it would not change the situation. In fact, it'd probably make it better because we'd have more funds to actually put towards tutoring and those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, the left talks about systemic problems. Okay, I'll take your argument and raise you one. We have systemic illiteracy, and it is the most well-funded scam of all time. And that's why if the left wants to get you in an argument or a discussion about teacher shortages and about this bull crap about underfunded schools, do not take the bait. Here's how that works. So if they're wanting to say, oh, well, if you funded our schools, the literacy rate would be better. You just keep pushing the pedal down. You're worried about the literacy rate, and yet you've got pornography in the school, and yet in all 12 academic subjects, at least here in North Carolina, you're diverting important instructional time to teaching social emotional learning. So the interest isn't money, because the social emotional learning costs money. In fact, just at the state level, it's yeah, exactly. And so it's actually billions of dollars into that. So money isn't the issue because you've got billions of it. Teachers aren't the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is that it's diverted to these left-leaning pet projects that are destroying the family. It's a human rights abuse on a catastrophic scale. Why? Because in America, school is compulsory. So kids have to do it. So what they're doing is culling in America every child who cannot afford private school. You've got a forced audience, and then you are pelting them with racial politics, identity politics, sexualization, and porn. That is why it's a human rights abuse. And you look at the UN, which I'm not fond of at all, their Declaration of Human Rights. We qualify for it, ladies and gentlemen. America qualifies. That's why, Shawn, you fight. That's why I fight, because I'm not going to sit here and allow, with my taxpayer dollars or with my conscience, to sit here and allow children to be abused like that. I will not do it.
Yeah. And there's one thing you mentioned, and I know we're coming up on time here, but I did a podcast with Tony Kinnett from the Chalkboard Review, August 18th. And in that, we talk about he actually got information from 615 Midwestern teachers who resigned. The number one reason teachers are resigning is poor student performance in the classroom and acting up in the classroom. The second most important reason is the woke politics that they don't want to teach it anymore. The third reason is you're not paying me enough to do this nonsense. And I think it was overwhelming. Like it was only 1 out of 10 teachers said that they would return if all of the things were fixed. They're burnt. They're done. It's not because of people like you and I, Sloan. Only 2% of the respondents said it's because parents are speaking out. It's all about the student behavior in the classroom, of which they caused with the whole CRT and LGBTQ cult push of protected classes.
Well,
so that's a great podcast if folks want to bone up on, being able to speak back at people who are talking about the funding issue. Throwing good money after bad is never the salvation for any business, right? You have to change your strategy.
We have to understand too, and we both know that Marxism, to institute it, it perpetuates on chaos. And so here in North Carolina, and I would imagine every other state, the CRT and SEL is combined with completely taking consequences and punishment out of the equation. So you're going to see those three things: chaos, racial indoctrination, and sexualization of children, which takes away their innocence. So, and that's
and that's a great thing, because I've said before, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube when it's squeezed out, right? It's over. Your innocence is lost. And so when people say, well, hey, those books should be available, or they can find it on the internet, not my kids, because I actually understand what they're looking at on the internet. That was really important to me growing up, when they were growing up. But yeah, innocence lost can never be regained. And so whether or not that book is on the library shelf, or in our case, Kelsey Stoyanova, the Maine Teacher of the Year, pushing kiddie porn to 11-year-olds, that is one of the most divisive issues. And that's really ultimately, they're trying to divide America. Again, this Marxist indoctrination that everybody have fallen into, this whole situation is just, they're willing to destroy America to separate your child from you. Right. That's the goal. And so we've let them do that for the last few decades. And now over the last few years, we're starting to fight back, and they're scared. And when I say a lot, when the flak is heaviest because I'm dropping truth bombs on the target, I know I'm hitting it dead center, you know, and when you do
Absolutely.
that, the flak can be heavy, but just,
You
you know,
better
just
believe
stand up to it, you know? Right.
Yeah, you look, you absolutely have to be willing to do that. You have to understand we're in a spiritual battle. And when you're
Yep.
confronting something that doesn't make sense and evil, we know, Shawn, people double down, triple down, quadruple down on stupid. So you
Yeah.
would think, I'm gonna
It's a
I'm
good one.
gonna do this, or I'm gonna say this truth, right? And then they're gonna see the error of their ways, and then we're going to be fine. No, you have to
Yeah.
destroy your enemy. I mean, metaphorically, totally
Right.
and completely. You have to. Do not go half measures and say, wow, I spoke at the school board meeting. They seem to be receptive. All is done. We're done here, folks.
Yeah.
No, you must win the victory if you're going to engage in battle.
And this is something I
That's
thought about you too, Sloan. I had a friend of mine send this to me the other day. He said I had a breaker anointing, and I don't know if you've ever heard that before. I had not heard it before this weekend, and so he sent me some information, and it says, "I am a breaker. I'm called to break open new paths with new ideas. I'm called to make a way where none seems to be. I'm called to break through the lines of the enemies and win the victory for the justice of heaven." Now, listen, I'm learning a lot about religion, but you know, you are a breaker as well, because you need somebody to kind of run through that wall so that other people can come in behind you. And
yeah,
again, as the tip of the sword, or whatever, you know, connotation people want to call me, I get pretty dull on occasion. But one of the things I really have enjoyed with you is that, you know, you keep me pumped up, and what you're doing keeps me pumped up. I'm hoping the things I do keep you pumped up, and all of these friends and allies that we've made across the country. We just need to keep fighting the fight, because it's happening. Will it happen for November 8th in this midterm? I hope so. But if it doesn't, we keep battling and hope that we can change this country back to what the American forefathers saw that we needed way back 250, 60 years ago.
yeah. And how about this? We don't have a choice. You can sit on your ass and let it happen, or you can do everything that you can and stand up and make a
Yeah.
difference. And to your point, when you stand up, you've got to risk losing it all. It's a risk that we take, and we do it not only for our own families, we do it for others who thank us every day and don't want to come forward, as you mentioned. So I want to thank you for coming
Right.
on. This has been great. It's been long overdue,
Cool.
long overdue. But I
No,
guess
I
I can
appreciate
get
it.
it canceling me, Shawn, but
I know. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I should have known better, and I greatly apologize. So, but no, anytime that you need me or want to talk about things that are going on in the educational sphere, I'm very open to it. And you know, like I said, I've volunteered this effort. I've been doing it 14 months now, unpaid. I've cost my family a lot of money and a lot of pain and suffering. But I think this
yeah.
is a calling, and I think this is something that people need to do. And again, you and I are those breakers, and we just need to keep breaking through those lines. So I really appreciate the job you're doing too. So stay strong, and keep keep those liberals off at bay a little bit. Make sure they don't get too close to you.
Oh yeah, no, we got it covered down here, and we always know that you're our brother, and we love talking to
All right.
you here. So, all right,
Awesome.
well, have a good one, and thank you again. Good
Thank
night,
you.
guys.